1 second so that I make sure that we need to be where we are. Thank you so much again for being here. We couldn't do this without all of our sponsor schools, so we want to just again say thank you to everybody for spreading the word and letting people know about this awesome opportunity. I am delighted because today we're going to do something a little fun, a little bit different than we have in the last couple of weeks, where we're going to require you to kind of be participatory. So get ready with your Q&A box and your polls and your chat. Like, we just want people to be involved here. So don't be afraid and don't be shy to try and figure out your opinions about things. So again, if you need Chinese support, we do have a place where you can get Chinese. We also are streaming on YouTube. So if for some reason Zoom isn't working for you, go ahead and hop on over there. And we may or may not play Spot Mr. View, as we often do. And so make sure you kind of keep an eye out, especially in my window, because someone might visit us. And if someone visits us, make sure you take a screenshot and email us, because we would love to give out prizes. So congratulations to all of you who won a prize last week. And we are looking forward to giving you another prize this week. Once again, here are the lists of sponsor schools. Thank you so much for being here, and for counselors for your support. And hopefully you are seeing your school's name on here. If you're not seeing your school's name on here, then you should bug them. Bug the counselors and leaders at your school and say, we would love to know all about Tuesday Talks more regularly. Okay, well, without further ado, because we have a lot to kind of dive into, I want to welcome my guests. And today they're from 3 amazing liberal arts colleges. And I would love for them to introduce themselves real quickly, and maybe even say a tiny bit about your school, but then they're going to change roles after that. So listen carefully, and then I'll let you guys take it away. Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I will start. I will actually start by asking my colleagues to introduce themselves first, because I'm going to be the first one to sort of provide some information. So I'm going to pass this over to Brian first to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Carleton.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Swan, representing Carleton College, which is located in Northfield, Minnesota. So if you know where Minnesota is, we're in the upper Midwest of the United States. It's a wonderful place, about 2,000 students. And there's so much more I could say, but I'm going to stop and I'll pass it on to my colleague, Kat.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kathleen Abels. Most people call me Kat, so feel free to do that. And I represent Haverford College, a liberal arts and sciences college just outside of Philadelphia. I'm really excited to share this virtual space with you all.
Thank you both. And my name is Ryan Ricciardi. I am here from Bowdoin College. Bowdoin is in Brunswick, Maine. And as everybody said, we are really excited to be here with you today. The first thing we're going to ask is actually interactive. We are going to have a poll, and we'd like you to tell us where you are in your process. Are you applying to college starting in the fall? Will you be applying in a few years? Are you the parent of someone who's going to be applying? So who are you? Where are you in this process? Just so we can see our audience in a way today. About half of you have responded so far, so I know there are more votes out there. This is great. We're going to give it another couple seconds. This is your chance to hit that button, have your vote counted. It's very important. All right, things are leveling off. So what I can tell you is that the majority is split there is no majority. However, we have a lot of people who are applying to college starting in this fall. So a lot of people going into their last year of high school, which is exciting. And then next we have a lot of counselors in the room, which is wonderful, and some parents. And then we have people who are applying to college in 2 years. So you're going in your second to last year of high school right now. And that's all a really great mix of people to join our program today. And I think it's really important to know that this program we are doing case studies. So a case study is meant to sort of introduce you to how an admissions officer reads an application, how we use the different pieces. And you all are going to get to make some decisions today in our case study. So we're going to be asking you, we're going to be introducing information about academics, about extracurriculars, about personal qualities, all the things that you will fill out in your Common App or your Coalition app or a QuestBridge app as you apply to college. So you're going to get to see how an admissions officer is going to read that information. And case studies, to be very open and transparent, are my favorite part of admissions work. I love doing case studies, but I think it's really important to know that case studies are not a path to admission. We're not telling you how to get admitted. We're not telling you the right way to fill out your application. We are telling you that there are going to be so many interesting pieces of you that come out through your application, and you're going to have this really neat opportunity to be an admissions officer and see how the work gets done. So to be clear, this is a really fun hour that we're going to spend together. We're going to have time for questions at the end, but it's not the way to fill out your application. It's just a way to understand how an admissions officer reads your application once you submit it. So we're going to have a good time today. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my friend and colleague, Brian, who's going to help sort of set the context for what it means to be doing a holistic review and a liberal arts college setting.
Thank you, Ryan, for that great introduction. And I am going to talk a little about how we think about the application from the liberal arts perspective, right? First and foremost, when you think about liberal arts and science institutions, we attract students who love to learn across disciplines, right? Sometimes people think when they hear liberal arts, they think it has everything to do with arts or politics. And those are parts of the liberal arts experience, but there's also the natural sciences. There's also the social sciences. And so when you think about why you would choose to apply to liberal arts college, you should think about the fact that when you go to one of our institutions, you have access to so many different academic opportunities, right? You're not limited just to one area of study. And so if you think about who you are and what you value in terms of your academics, if you're someone that loves the sciences and humanities, a liberal arts college may be a great fit. If you're someone that loves to talk about theater as well as biology, a liberal arts college may be a great fit. And when we look at your application, when you apply to a liberal arts college, there are several different factors we're trying to take into consideration, right? Obviously, we'll look at your academic record, right? Whether you're in an international curriculum or a national curriculum. We're going to pay attention to the classes you've taken and your performance in that. But we're not just looking at academics. In that holistic review that we do at a liberal arts college, we're also looking at the personal and community factors that are part of your application. We're going to look at the activities you've chosen to get involved in. We're going to look at the letters of recommendation submitted on your behalf. We're also going to look at the essay that you submit in the common application or the coalition application. All of those combine as we do this review, and then also thinking about the overall sort of fit with our institution. If every institution is going to have their own sort of strengths and things that they really are proud about. And so as we think about your application, we're also thinking about that overall fit with our institution, right? And so this Venn diagram does a really nice job of kind of overlying this idea of looking at the academic factors, but also those personal community factors, as well as that overall fit. We think about all these together, partly because at a liberal arts college, we're often very residential. We're often very much a place where students are living and learning together. And so when we lead your application, right, we're not just thinking of you as a student in the classroom, we're also considering how you, that student, is going to be involved in our community. And again, thinking about that overall fit with our institution. So liberal arts colleges could be a great opportunity for a lot of the students that are here, partly because we offer a really tight-knit sense of community, but also really fantastic academic opportunities, whether it's research-based, whether it's getting a chance to do study abroad. If you look at a lot of liberal arts colleges in the US, they're going to offer so many opportunities to have this personalized education. That's one of the reasons we do what we do, right? We're trying to think of you as a person and then give you the opportunity to come to our campus to have that personalized sort of opportunity. With that said, let's talk a little more about the college we're going to represent. So I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Kat, who will talk about that.
Wonderful. So I am here to offer you a job. How exciting. Did you know that this would be part of your morning, your afternoon, your evening, right? Don't get too excited, because I will say that while it's very fulfilling work, the pay isn't excellent, right? So we can talk about that a little bit too, but we all have the privilege of representing Nightingale College. And I think it's really important to recognize, and this is a little bit corny, but bear with me, right? When you think about the word admission, mission is really central to that word. What we're doing is not just admitting students, but really shaping a class and building a community. And we're really excited to have you join us today for this part of the experience, right? And what we're going to ask you to do is really think about, what does Nightingale value? How are we going to admit students that are going to further the mission and the values of this institution, right? So I'm going to ask you just to take a moment and read through some of these, what we would call sort of institutional priorities or a school profile that we've shared with you all. And then I would love, I know it can be hard, but I would love for you to put in the chat, and you can just send it to hosts and panelists, some of the ideas or aspects of this institutional profile that you think are really important, that you think might shape and inform the way in which we view students, the way in which we think about who will the student be when they get to Nightingale. So take a moment, read through this slide, and sort of begin to process, okay, how is this going to shape and inform the way in which I consider 3 really fantastic students? All right, so heavy community engagement with academic rigor. Yeah, right, so this is a residential campus. That's a really sort of important component. So we're thinking about not only who you are in the classroom, but the way in which you'll build community outside the classroom, right? So that's a great component of this. And of course, yeah, you're going to work hard as a student on our campus, and we want to make sure our students are going to be able to thrive academically, right? So that certainly is a lens to use in terms of our application review. Close connections with staff and other students, right? Relationships are central to your experience at Nightingale. And that's sort of a great way of articulating that. So that's awesome. Thank you. Any other sort of final thoughts or ideas that are some takeaways from looking at this institutional profile? There are 2 things that really, a diverse student body, awesome, right? So students are choosing to come to Nightingale from all over the United States and all over the globe. And that's a really important component of community building and the admission process. And yeah, there's someone else who, a few people now have sort of put in the chat that we have a new president who is creating a center for STEM research, right? So that is something that is sort of top of mind in our office. And one sort of final component that I want to note is that we are SAT, ACT optional, and optional truly means optional at Nightingale or any other college or university that says that, right? So there may be some students who are submitting their test scores that we're reviewing and other students who haven't. And we don't have a preference between those 2 decisions. Those are both equally valuable. And then the last thing that I would highlight is this idea of highly selective, right? So at Nightingale, 25% of students who apply are admitted, and we practice holistic admission. So we're not going to give you a formula, right? They're all three of these students are really wonderful, are students that we think could contribute in meaningful ways. And we're excited to hear sort of how you think about who these students are in the context of our applicant pool as well. So with that, sort of what we'll do next is head into our actual case study exercise. Ryan, maybe do you want to sort of highlight what we sort of aim to do with these three students, and then we'll each have the opportunity to sort of share and advocate for the students that were assigned.
Yeah, so we have three students who have applied to Nightingale. And you can see, you have seen the profile, you know what Nightingale is about. Everybody did such a good job of talking about the diversity, the academic rigor, the community focus. The values that are coming out are really great. The curiosity, people have pointed out that STEM program and research center that our new president. So all of that is on our minds as admissions officers. Kat, Brian, and I are each going to be the voice to tell you about three different applicants. So Kat is going to talk to you about Samuel. She is going to be Samuel's advocate. We are going to start with our academic picture. And we're going to talk about the different academic strengths of each candidate that we are talking about. So Kat is going to talk about Samuel's academic strengths. We're going to go into the rigor that Samuel has taken, the testing if it's present, the grades that Samuel has achieved. And then we're going to do that for Dia, and we're going to do that for Wrong. And then we're going to vote. You guys are going to vote based on the presentation that you've heard. You are sitting around a committee table and you're going to say, yes, based on the academic pieces, this is who I would admit right now. And then we are subsequently going to do that 2 more times. And each time we're going to add more information about the person. Because remember that Kat said, this is a holistic review process for Nightingale College. So it's not one piece that matters the most, right? Academics are at the core of what we do because we are an institution of learning, but we pay attention to the whole person and the whole application. So we're going to build each time a little more information into that picture of the person. And by the end, you'll have the whole person as presented through their file to vote on. So we're going to do this 3 times. And we're going to start with Kat presenting Samuel. So pay attention because you are now the committee and you are about to decide who out of these 3 students is going to be admitted. And to be clear, you can only admit one person. You can only admit one. We're a very selective school. And so that means we have limited seats in the class and we have a lot of applicants who are going to be able to fulfill that. So I'm going to pass it over to Kat to start the academic presentation for Samuel.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Well, I am really delighted to share with you a little bit about Samuel today. So Samuel is in a pretty intense AP curriculum. He's taken 12 APs total, and he's in 7, a whopping 7 his senior year. They are super STEM focused. So you can see the courses that he's taken. He is in a high school that has an AP curriculum, as is probably clear by his choices. And he's really taking advantage of certainly the STEM curriculum within the broader sort of AP offerings. He's ranked in the top 20% in his high school, and he's gotten some Bs. So you see out of that sort of 4.0, he has a 3.3. And there are more Bs than As in his first semester senior year course sort of grades, but I would say he's in a really strong curriculum. So he's capable of being an A student, but really pushing himself and maybe is sort of spreading himself a little bit too thin. But I would articulate that as a place that's interested in sort of building the science center, Samuel is going to be someone who hits the ground running. So I'm really excited about his candidacy. Brian, how would you sort of begin with Dia?
Yeah, I get to talk about Dia, and let me tell you, Dia is doing great. If you look at her academic rank, she's in the top 4% of her class. Her GPA is a 3.9 out of 4. So she's consistently getting A's. Her freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. She's taking 4 APs in her senior year, and we'll have taken a total of 8 AP classes. And if you look at those courses, right, there's a nice spread to them, right? She's taking AP coursework in math, but also a foreign language, German, English, as well as a science and biology. And so there's a great breadth to this student academically, right? She has strength across the board. Ultimately, part of what I like about Dia is that she, regardless of when she's been taking these rigorous courses, right, she's getting those consistent A's. And so the academic performance is top notch. There's more I could say about Dia, but I'm gonna stop. Let's hear about wrong from Ryan.
Thank you. So I think that Wrong has really shown it that he really digs in across the curriculum. So you can see that he's taken a total of 10 AP. So he's really taking advantage of lots of different opportunities to pursue rigor. And in his senior year, he is taking 1 AP in each of the core academic disciplines. He's taking calculus, he's taking physics, world history, English literature, French. He's really showing the breadth of his ability. And I think that that shows us that when he gets to Nightingale, there are lots of different directions that he's going to go. He's going to take advantage of being in a liberal arts college and really dig into the depth of whatever he ends up choosing to study. But what he shows us is that he's really curious and he's really thinking about how all these different disciplines connect. He's had a bit of a mixed sort of grade outcome. He's an A-B mix, which is really, you know, with that kind of rigorous curriculum, he's doing really well and showing us that he's still scoring at the top consistently. He's in the top 10% of his class. And with his TOEFL of 112, it's really clear to me that he will easily jump into discussion. He'll have a really sort of robust classroom presence. And I think he's really excited about learning. All right. So we're going to launch our first poll. So with just the academic information, remembering that Nightingale College has all of those priorities to think about and that you are the steward of Nightingale College, you have just the academic information right now. Who are you admitting? We'll give you about 30 seconds or so, maybe a minute to think about this. There are lots of votes coming in. This is very exciting. All right, about half of you have voted. That means half of you are still thinking. So we're gonna have about 15 more seconds to choose. All right, so with most votes in, I will tell you that the admit, after just thinking about academics, is wrong, followed very closely by Dia, and Samuel really has his strong supporters with coming in there in the third spot. So with academics, we have wrong, then Dia, then Samuel. All right. So now you've made that call, right? You've listened to the academic information. And as we said, academics are at the core of what we do at Nightingale. So it's the first thing we're going to look at, but it's not the only thing that we do at Nightingale. So we're going to add information to each applicant. And now you're going to build on that for the next piece. So we're going to move on to extracurriculars. And Kat is going to talk about Samuel and his extracurriculars and his essay and recommendations.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. So we've seen on Samuel's transcript, right, the way in which he engages in science and the science fields. And it's really exciting to see in his extracurricular engagement that he conducts his own science research as well. He founded an educational site that focused on science experiments. So he thinks a lot about not only his own experience, but also allowing other people to engage in work that he's really passionate about. And I think one of the aspects of any application that can be so exciting is when sort of pieces begin to connect and build sort of a larger idea and understanding of who the student is. And that certainly is taking shape for me with Samuel. He talked in his essay about his summer program being canceled, unfortunately, due to COVID. But instead of sort of, twiddling his thumbs, he created his own independent research project and really sort of made the most of the opportunities that he had afforded to him. It was great to read his recommendations because those also took sort of a lot of the same themes of initiative, that sort of depth of engagement, calling him an exceptional research. But it did sort of maybe highlight some reasons for some of the lower grades, not bad grades by any means, but sort of lower grades in the scheme of who we're able to consider at Nightingale. And so teachers highlighted that maybe his own research has sort of taken him away from some of the classwork, right? So I think for him, it's really thinking about potential. When he's in an academic environment and in an academic setting, in a community setting, where he's able to focus more closely on research, who is he going to be? And that's what I would ask for you to consider, my dear committee members. All right, Brian, take it away.
Yeah, so committee, let's talk a little more about Dia and what she's doing outside the classroom. Her extracurricular involvement has a couple of different themes that kind of emerge, right? She's been involved in traditional dance since age 5. She's also a leader in her school's theater club. So you can easily see her getting involved in the arts community at Nightingale College, right? Whether that's doing dance or getting involved in theater, or maybe even doing something different, right? But that sort of passion for the arts comes across as a pretty genuine one here. The other piece of her extracurricular involvement I think is noteworthy is her amount of time she's spent volunteering, right? Over 300 hours. That's tremendous dedication being shown to helping others attain their education, right? And so she gives this sense of being someone who's involved not just in the arts, but also wants to give to other people, right? Give other students opportunity. And to me, that sounds like someone we want at Nightingale College. If you look at then her sort of essay that she wrote, she's wrote her essay about her mother's life of overcoming hardship. Again, that kind of helps me get a sense of the sort of circumstances Dia has grown up in, right? The fact that she's thoughtful, the fact that she is someone who is going to be a good listener to others that maybe have had hardships in their life also. Her recommendations also speak really highly to that personal and mature sort of perspective, right? Her recommendations talk about the tremendous growth and resilience she's shown in transitioning to her AP curriculum. Now, keep in mind, like I said, her academic record, she's almost all A's, has some great rigor as well. And so her recommendations really highlight that sort of growth and resilience in her as a student. That passion for helping others also comes through in her recommendation, as well as then this idea that, yeah, she's learned a lot from her mother's hardship, right? So that compelling personal story that the recommendations tell us about also connects to that essay that she's written about, right? And so when you think about someone like Dia, right, here's someone who has done very well academically, but also has been really involved outside the classroom, right, in theater and volunteering and dance. Her recommendations cite her as someone who will help others and someone that will pull people in and pull them along as she continues her journey for her great academic story. Ryan, let's hear some more about wrong.
I really want to thank everybody for being so convinced about wrong after the academics. And I don't think that you're going to be disappointed with wrong's impact on Nightingale's campus. So I think one of the really neat parts about Wrong is that they've really dug into the environmental component of life outside the classroom. So founder of an environmental club, and really thinking about that impact on the world around them. They do other things too. There's basketball and debate in English, which I find really says a lot about the many ways that they can think deeply about different questions, and not just thinking about them outside the classroom, but really thinking about that personality type being inside the classroom and digging in to those really hard questions and not being afraid of them. That passion for the environment and sustainability comes through in the rest of their application too. It's actually really a focus of the essay. So what it meant to be the leader and the founder of that sustainability club and to make a difference in a small way in that community, I think really tells us how they're going to come to Nightingale and make a difference here, and really see places to start new things and carve out spaces. And I think all of that initiative and energy is really even more impressive, because in the recommendations we see that the teachers tell us that Wrong really started out slowly in high school, that was really quiet in the classroom, and had all these sort of underlying values of determination and intelligence and energy and spirit, but was really sort of slow to start and has really blossomed in the last couple of years. So I think we'd be getting Wrong as they really have come into themselves and are on the upward trajectory, and not just in the classroom, but really in their community, which is really exciting for all of us. All right, so now you have a little more information. You had the academic piece first, and now you have a little more information about their extracurriculars, how other people in their community see them, the impact that they're having. So let's vote again with more information now about each candidate. Who are you going to admit? We'll give it again another minute or so. So think about it. Put your vote out there. We have about a third of the people who've already voted already, which is great. Everybody's really excited for their candidate. I love it. Ooh, it's neck and neck. It's neck and neck. If you're on the fence, you should get your vote in. We're missing some votes out there. All right, another like 15 seconds or so for anybody who's having some trouble making a decision. All right, so with 2 slides full of information, Wrong is still in the lead, but it's so close that only 2 votes separate Wrong from Dia. And Samuel, still hanging on, has a few supporters less than what he had the first time around, but he's doing doing it. I just got a note saying that in the other streaming platforms, Wrong has a more clear lead. So we're just going to say Wrong is still in the lead here. Dia close behind, and Samuel still has his passionate advocates, which is exactly what committee is for. All right, so we're going to finish up. So now after this one, you're going to have all the information to make your final decision about the candidate. So Kat, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So one of the ways in which we sort of consider candidates, right, is their engagement in this process. And look, Samuel, he participated in a virtual case studies program. Amazing. he's clearly thinking about sort of, this process and how he can best represent himself and be the best sort of most authentic version of himself in his application. He also completed a Skype interview with an admissions counselor, and that was really positive. So we have some additional opportunities to hear from him directly. And that's something that we'd sort of think about. If interviewing is an option, then that's definitely something that you should feel free to take advantage of, because that can only add to your application. When we think about sort of building a diverse community, right, students' lived experiences where they've lived across the globe is something that sort of impacts who they'll be when they get to our campus. So Samuel has lived in at least 2 countries. He was born in London and he now lives in Singapore. We knew that he was in the top 20% of his school, but now we know, right, that he attends one of the top schools in the city. So one of the top schools in Singapore, which sends many students to Nightingale, right? So this is a place where we have a strong track record of student success and thriving at Nightingale. And isn't that what we want, right? Students who are going to be able to hit the ground running, engage deeply, and be pushed to be the best version of themselves as they take advantage of the 4-year experience at Nightingale. So I remain really excited about Samuel. I understand that maybe he doesn't have the GPA as some other students, but when we think about admission, right, it's not a reward for what you've done, but it's a sort of reflection of your own potential. And so I think potential is really the name of the game with Samuel. Brian.
Yes, thank you. I'll tell you a little more about Dia. And part of her story too is she actually applied to Nightingale early decision, but was deferred. And so for thinking about demonstrated interest, I don't know how you can demonstrate more interest than that by choosing us as your early decision school. But she was deferred, right? And but she still has been in touch with us, right? She emailed us, the admissions office, to kind of ask about the different academic programs and wanting to connect with the professor. Again, knowing that we're a smaller institution, those sorts of requests are pretty common, and we're more than happy to get her in touch with that professor to have that conversation. Additionally, I think Dia, when you look at those additional factors, right, she'll be the first in her family to finish high school, right? So there's a tremendous path that she's on, right, to be the first in her family to finish high school. She's born and raised in Delhi, India. And we also know that, her essay talked about her mother's sort of hardships, and partly those hardships are important to know because in the context, right, her father passed away, right? So if you think about Dia as an applicant, you have amazing academics, great community involvement and passion for the arts, someone who is mature, someone who is caring, and you think about that in the context of losing a parent, being the first in your family to finish high school, as well as this idea that she had already told us through the early decision process that Nightingale was her first choice. I think all the candidates here are really compelling, but Dia has so much to offer and has worked so hard to get to this point, and would make an amazing addition to Nightingale College. Ryan, the floor is yours.
So I think as we're talking about knowledge of Nightingale and doing your research, Rong actually met with one of us when we were able to travel pre-pandemic to China. We were able to meet with Rong one-on-one in the fall of their junior year. And I think that meeting really sort of showed Rong that there was a lot that Nightingale could offer them. Rong was born and still lives in Shanghai. Parents went to university in China. And so Rong's going to be the first person to go to school in the United States. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that Rong has shown us that they are really willing to take risks because they are at a high school that is graduating its first class with an AP curriculum. And so Wrong really went out on a limb and started something new, tried something new, and nailed it, has done so well in this new to this school curriculum. So really showed us the risk taking that they're willing to do, showed us that they are really digging into new experiences with the sense of adventure of coming to the United States to go to school, knows Nightingale from that meeting. So I just really think that Wrong has shown us at each point in the application that there's a lot of great fit in and out of the classroom with Nightingale, and I'm all in on Wrong. All right, so here we are. You now have all the information. We're going to launch one last vote. Think about it. Who will you admit to Nightingale, considering all of the priorities of Nightingale and all the different pieces that each applicant has brought to the table through their application? We're going to give it like another 15, 20 seconds. This is a hard one. This is the final decision. This is committee coming down to it. All right, the votes have really leveled off. Anyone have one last opinion out there that they want to share? Okay, so the final decision for Nightingale College is that Dia is going to be our admit. Coming from the middle to rise to the admit decision, committee really got behind Dia. And I think this is actually a great opportunity for you to put in the chat, just to the hosts and the panelists, tell us if you voted for Dia, why? If you voted for Wrong, why? Wrong came in behind Dia, and then Samuel still hung on to his votes. He was actually very consistent throughout, sort of lost a few in the middle, but gained them back at the end. So tell us in a word or two why you chose your candidate. Was it the academic piece that was overwhelmingly compelling to you? Was it the story of the essay and family hardships? Yeah, if you switched votes, why don't you tell us that too? So we have some in here. Someone switched from Wrong to Dia because she was able to achieve what she had, given that really complicated background. And the fact that she had applied ED1 meant that Nightingale was likely to yield her, was very compelling. She, more on Dia, she achieved, even with that background, so that same idea of context, and passionate, supportive, excuse me, a lot of interests. People talking about first gen, so the first person in her family to go to college, the academic strength. Lots of people talking about the holistic component of Dia's application and each piece building on it, which is exactly what holistic wants, which is exactly what holistic admissions is all about, is seeing not just one piece and anchoring on it, but seeing each piece as really important in thinking about impact in community. People are saying that Wrong was really strong in the first two, but the lack of demonstrated interest really changed their perspective on whether or not he would come to Nightingale. These are really great. These are really great takeaways. A lot of support for Dia in here. This is amazing, you guys. I love this so much. So I think we are going to launch a poll right now that said, did you change your vote, right? As you learned more, were you voting for someone different in round 2 or round 3 than you did in round 1? And I think as I keep looking at what's coming in, I voted for Wrong from beginning to end. I like the academic spread and strength and the leadership that he showed. Absolutely great. Dia continues to have very passionate supporters in here in terms of the breadth of her interests and how she persevered. We have about half of the people voting right now. And more people than not have said yes, they changed their vote throughout as they learned more information, which is great. Yeah, this is really great. So I think you got some insight into what a committee is like. I think it's really important for us to sort of spend a minute maybe talking about what's not like a real committee about this process. And I'm going to ask Brian and Kat to jump right in. I would say my first thing is that we don't vote on candidates. It is a consensus process. And so there isn't a sort of like counting votes around the table and then saying admit. It's a conversation that sort of allows a lot of different voices around the table to talk about the different pieces that they see in each applicant's application. What would you guys add?
I think one thing to say is that we never have 3 candidates and 1 space available, right? I hope you could tell that we weren't really comparing candidates to one another in the way that we were talking about them, right? And so that is very true to the admission committee. But the ultimate outcome of only having 1 place for these 3 candidates is not sort of how things go. Yes, we represent today a highly selective institution. Every other day of the year, the 3 of us represent highly selective institutions. So not every student that we're compelled by, and not even close, is able to be admitted. But if there was a really sort of strong consensus building around either of these other candidates, then we would make space in the class for them, right? And I think that's a really important thing to take away. So there isn't just 1 space, 3 students sort of vying for that and thinking about shaping a class and building a community. Like Ryan said, we listen to each other's voices and we think about the candidates that we feel most pulled and most compelled by.
Yeah, and to build on what my colleagues are saying, I think the other piece that wasn't here as much as we sometimes see in the actual committee is talking about those institutional priorities, right? At the beginning, we kind of mentioned that we've got this new STEM center being built, but then that didn't really translate into the decision we made, right? And not saying that we would have gone wrong with either Samuel or Wrong or Dia, but when we're in this committee process, we have to think about these institutional priorities, right? We are paying attention to what we need for this year or what's coming down the road, right? And that is sometimes a factor that comes into play in a way that this committee, this exercise, didn't have as much conversation about. So.
Yeah, there's a question that came in about why, and so what I should say is, first of all, thank you guys for weighing in on what is real about this and what is maybe a little bit structured for this presentation. But what I would encourage everybody who's watching to do is put your questions in the Q&A. This is definitely the time to say, like, so why did this happen? Or I saw this and didn't see it come through in the application or in the conversation. So put your questions in the Q&A. We're here to answer them. And the first one that I have is, why do we think Dia was deferred in ED1? I'm gonna, as her advocate, Brian, I'm gonna toss that to you.
Sure. So deferral happens sometimes when you don't expect it, right? You can be a strong applicant and be deferred, not for anything you've done, right? But because of the limited space that's available. And I can tell you on the admission side, right? When we defer, right, we're not doing that just to kick the can down the road, right? When you apply early decision, we're often trying to give you a yes or no answer. Deferral only happens for a handful of students that we think really are exceptional, but for one reason or another, our process, the limitations of our process means that we maybe aren't able to admit them right then. And so a deferral can happen, right? But it doesn't mean that you wouldn't get strong consideration down the road, right? It's just a matter, it's just reality of some of the challenges we face in terms of having a small number of seats available and then having to make some really tough decisions, even in that early decision process.
One of the things that I think is really interesting in all of this is sort of going back to Brian's presentation is in talking about fit. And I wonder if we can talk a little bit about like how a student can show fit with an institution that they're interested in. Like, is that something that we want students to like try to cultivate in their application? Like, what are we looking for when we're sort of talking about like showing fit?
There are lots of great ways to answer that question. I think fit comes back to, in some ways, institutional priorities, which you may or may not know as an applicant. So what is most important is to be true to yourself in the application process. You don't always know the questions we're asking and thinking about in our admission committees, but what you do know is who you are, what you value, and what you bring to the communities that you're a part of. And so I think you can, in thinking about your own fit at an institution, that's really important to this process, but not trying to get into the mind of an admission officer and thinking about sort of the role that fit might play from our perspective, because there's a lot that you might know and there's a lot that you might not. And so controlling what you can control and being authentic to yourself is going to really allow you to find the best place to ultimately enroll and call home.
Ryan, I'm going to jump in here if that's okay, because I'm seeing some questions on the other platform as well. But I wanted to kind of take a step back because when we did this case study, you all came in having already read your applicants, right? And so you were advocating for them, you were describing them. Let's take one step backwards. Like when you're reading, I think, you know, how are you taking notes like to prepare for that committee meeting? Are you, you know, somebody asked like, are you cross-referencing, you know, like if someone just, you know, one of those students, I think it was Samuel, did submit a test score, right? So are you looking at the test score and then cross-referencing with the grades? I think people are kind of, let's take one step back. When you first read, how much time are you spending? And then how do you determine whether or not you are advocating for someone once you get to that committee level?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. We never want to step on each other's toes, which always leads to these awkward moments. I'll start and then Brian jump in. I think what's really important to know is that when we're reading an application, we're focused entirely on that application. We're not cross-referencing to other applicants, and we're not putting a time limit on what we can spend per each application. We spend what each application needs for us to understand the person who spent so much time writing it. So our whole goal in that time period that we have in your application is to get to know you. We are looking first and foremost at academics, and those are the anchor sort of the work that we do, because we work for institutions of education. And so being a student is the first job that you have at each of our schools. In terms of thinking about things like how testing and transcripts go together, or how extracurriculars and transcripts relate to each other, it can be very different for every single student. So each piece of your application can be connected, or each piece can show very different parts of who you are. And so thinking about, like, for example, your test scores and your transcript, those are often very much in line. Sometimes they're not. I'll be honest, your test score is the least interesting piece of information that I have about you in the entire application. It tells me very little about who you are as a human being and your ability to succeed in our classrooms. So I'm much more interested in your transcript than I am in your testing. And then in thinking about like how your transcript relates to your extracurriculars, sometimes like wrong, right? He had a lot of work across the curriculum, but he had very focused extracurriculars. Sometimes those focused extracurriculars are on the same thing that you want to study. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes your extracurriculars are really broad. It really is a luxury in this world, but liberal arts college admissions officers really spend the time to get to know you in the way that you presented yourself without any agenda or sort of hidden path or like idea of what you should be. We are just trying to get to know you, and each piece of the application lends itself to that.
I forgot what I was going to say, but but I think what I was going to add, Kat, it's not Kat, sorry, Ryan. What I was going to add was this idea that as we read, right, like we are taking notes, right? So when we get to the committee process, we kind of refer to the notes, and what you saw on the screen was kind of this distillation of what those notes may look like. But we do that, as Ryan mentioned, without a time cap, but we really do it with the intent of trying to dig in and try to understand the context of which a student is presenting their application from.
So I, I guess, at what point does committee begin? Like in a reading season, some people are, because you obviously have cycles as well. You have your ED, rounds, and then you have, so at what point does committee kind of, happen? And are you doing it simultaneously with reading? What's kind of, and is it the same at all three of your colleges, or is it like really up to the different institution, how they want to run that process? And I don't know if you were able to hear my question at all.
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you. So Ryan and Brian have heard me say this many times, but it's one of my best lines. So there's a joke in college admission that you can answer pretty much every question with "it depends," and that's a great answer here. It really totally depends, right? I think what's important to note is we think about lots of different contexts in your application. You in the context of your high school, right? We try to root you in the context of what's offered at your high school. You hopefully saw that in this process. You in the context of your home life, right? Have other people in your family studied in the United States? Have other people in your family gone to college or university, right? What sort of supports at home have you had? What ways in which have you contributed to your family environment and your family community? We think about you in the context of our applicant pools. And so in thinking about sort of institutional priorities, we're making decisions that we think are going to sort of further the mission and values of our institutions. And those processes might look a little bit different, but they're ultimately based on what we think makes the most sense for each of our communities. And then lastly, we think about you in the sort of global context, right? And recognize the way in which COVID-19 has impacted us all, but in different ways, and wanting to make sure we're giving sort of voice to those impacts also. So the sort of processes might look slightly different, but sort of making sure that we're able to be advocates for our students, and also to change our minds, right? So it's so great that over 2/3 of you changed your mind in this process, because while I was really a strong advocate for Samuel throughout the entirety of this, most commonly, right, I come in, I might advocate for someone, and that is someone I will continue to advocate for. But there are other times when I see sort of the broader pool, or where I hear other people's voices, and I think, you know what, you're right. Like maybe this isn't the person that I'm most compelled by, given the sort of limited space that we have. So again, sort of a longer answer, but that sort of idea of context is really important, not only in hearing your voice come through, but in building a process that we think is best reflective of our values as an institution.
Fantastic. There are so many questions here, and I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh no, we're out of time. So I just want to say thank you to the three of you for doing this amazing, fun activity with our audience. It has elicited a lot more question, which is why I want to encourage everybody who's here, come to the future Tuesday talks, because every Tuesday talk, we talk a little bit about what this means and how schools look at you. And there are a lot of questions about, like, is it the breadth that matters? What if my school doesn't rank? What if, like, we only looked at AP curriculum, for example, for this particular case study, but the reality is you have, hundreds of different kind of curriculums you're looking at. So we are going to keep doing these. So come back. If you felt like my questions were not answered, please do come back. I am going to share the screen real quickly, just so that people have kind of some contact information if they need, because we always want to answer more questions. So you guys can take a quick look at that. For those of you who are interested, I think in this case study, Samuel did an interview, and I have a colleague on this call who is going to stay on for another 20 minutes to answer questions specifically about interviews. And so if this is your first time hearing about Initial View and you're kind of curious what an interview is, she's going to stay on and talk a little bit about what that process is, how it kind of fits into the review process, like we started to mention today. I'm seeing this comment, like, now people are seeing how challenging your jobs are. So Brian, Kat, Ryan, you are doing an amazing job building these wonderful classes at your colleges. And thank you for, showing a little bit of that to our audience today, and for taking time out of your busy schedule to do that. Great. Everybody enjoy your afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Stay on if you want to know more about interviews, and the rest of us, have a great day. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, Gloria. Hi, everybody.
Bye. All right, Yokun, I'm going to take off. I'll see you.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
All right, hello, everybody. So if you're staying with us, we're going to take the next 20 minutes or so to do some Q&A about interviews. If you're not familiar with Initial View, or if you have questions about how they work and how admissions looks at interviews, how that all works together, I'm here to answer any of your questions, and I will be sharing my screen briefly just so you have some visuals to look at. And you can continue to use the Q&A box or the chat function to put your questions in, and I'll just answer them in the order that they come in. And by the way, my name is Yoquin. I'm currently an interviewer with Initial View. I'm also a former admissions officer at another liberal arts college. So if you have questions about interviews from the admissions side, I'm also here to answer them. So feel free to put any questions you have in the chat or in the Q&A. And since they're not currently questions coming in, I feel like people might be putting them in as we speak. So if you don't know what what Initial View interviews look like, so there are two parts to Initial View interview. The first one is a video conversation that you have with one of our interviewers, and it's usually between 12 and 15 minutes. And you have a conversation with them. It's usually a free-flowing conversation. It's not like question, answer, question, answer. And then the interviewer gets you to share your interests, your passions. We dig a little deeper and really ask you to think about the things you want to highlight about yourself to show admissions officers. And then you also get the chance to do a timed piece of writing, so a 20-minute typed writing sample, which will be sent with the video to all the colleges that you're applying to that accept initial view interviews. So that's, very briefly what an interview with initial view entails. So someone asked a question, it's not super related to interviews, but I'll go ahead and answer that as well. So why are liberal arts colleges usually not shown in the US News top rankings? So if you have questions about rankings, there's a lot to say about rankings, but I'll just say that liberal arts colleges are ranked separately from the universities, right? The national universities, because they're different type of educations. If you were here for the session at the beginning, Brian from Carleton did a little spiel about what liberal arts colleges are and what that type of education is. So it is very different from going to a large university, a research-based university. So that's why liberal arts colleges are usually ranked separately. So they're two different rankings. So I have another question here. What part of the interview is more likely to be the determining factor that the interviewer will look at? The attitude, the content? So specifically about the initial view interviews, the interviewer does not evaluate or does not review the actual interview. So when me as an interviewer, when I talk to a student, after we have the conversation and the video is recorded, initial view just goes ahead and if you're happy with that particular interview, initial view just goes ahead and sends that to all the schools that you are applying to that you want to see this particular interview. So we do not add any comments or scores or any sort of evaluating information to that interview. And in terms of what that looks like on the admissions side, as an admissions officer who used to watch a lot of initial view interviews, I would say the things that were important to me during the review process of an application is, first of all, initial view interviews are a way that I look at a student's English capabilities. I look at if they're expressing their ideas in a way that would allow them to have conversations or discussions in a class setting, in a seminar setting, in one of our classes in college, right? So first, it is one of the many ways that we evaluate a student's language capabilities. And I also look at what does a student want to tell me? What does the student think are the important things about themselves that I, as an admissions officer, should know, right? So a lot of times, you can only talk about so many things in a 15-minute interview. So what are the things that the student chooses to talk about, right? They likely are the most important things that I should know about a student. And another thing that I think about is, what are the deeper reasons behind the things that the student does, right? So I might know that the student is involved in Model UN. I can tell that from their activities list. I can tell that from their personal essay. It might be one of the things that they chose to write about, or it might be mentioned in one of the recommendation letters, right? But the interview might give the student a chance to really dig deep into the reasons behind their involvement in Model UN, right? So maybe it's because they really enjoy having conversations about issues in the world that they really care about. Maybe that's the environment, maybe that's politics, maybe that's something else. Or maybe it's one of the ways that they engage with others that they think is really meaningful, right? So the interview also gives me a chance to really look behind the activities list, to really look behind, just a few sentences that might be mentioned in the recommendation letter. So I would say the admissions officer is always looking for these answers, always looking behind kind of the deeper motives, right? We like to dig a little deeper than just what is said or what is listed in the application. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so we have another question of what usually are the questions that the interviewer asks. So let me just go to a different slide. So here you can see all the colleges and universities that accept initial view interviews. And by the way, here's how an initial view interview shows up for an admissions officer. So this is usually kind of the platform that we use, the CRM, to review applications. And on the left, you can see, right, all the different components of an application, right? The profile, the transcript, the recommendation letters, and then initial view is usually one of the tabs that that admissions officers will have. So we can just click into it, and then we'll be able to see, first of all, the video on the left, and then your 20-minute timed writing sample on the right. All right, so we talked a little bit about kind of what admissions officers are looking for in an interview. And in terms of, oops. All right, and here are some of the suggestions, recommendations we have for students who are thinking about an interview. There are no right or wrong answers, right? So just be yourself. And to be able to do that, you really need to know yourself. You need to know the things that are important to you, the things that make you unique, right? That make you stand out. And I would say that no interviewers go into an interview knowing what questions they'll ask, because we don't plan questions, because it's more of a conversation and not like a question answer format. I listen to what the student wants to say, right? I might ask some initial questions to get the student talking about their passions and their interests. And once we get there, I ask questions based on their answers, right? So if they tell me about this one thing that they're particularly interested in, and then I'll dig a little deeper. Why are you interested in this thing, right? So how did you first get involved? I want to know kind of the deeper reasons behind why you do the things that you do and why you love the things that you love. So there really aren't set questions for an interview. It really is based on what the student chooses to offer or chooses to provide in the interview. All right, so someone asked if we could go back to the college list. So here you go. There are three different pages. There are lots of schools, and there you can find the full list on the Initial View website as well. And there's a question about, okay, how do I make the activities that you're involved in a lot more vivid in the interview? So that's a great question, right? So if I already said, right, these are the things that I do in my activities list, how do I add more detail? How do I make things, stand out more in the interview to admissions officers? So I would say details matter. You'll hear the same thing about essays as well. So really think about specific moments and specific examples in the activities that you're involved in. So if you're talking about starting a robotics club that you're really involved in at school, so think about a particular project that was important to you, that you were really proud of, that you might have, run into some challenges during. Maybe it's with your teammates, maybe it's about the particular the process that was challenging, but think about examples, right? Think about moments, think about stories that really add to your experience. And going back to what we were saying, it's really about knowing yourself and going back to your experience and think about what was really important to me, right? So why was this activity important to me? Did I gain anything from this particular experience, right? So what are some reflections that I have about this activity? So ask yourself those questions and really think about examples that you can provide during your conversation. So that really adds so much to just, one activity, Model UN, right? Or robotics club, which really looks the same, because many people are doing these things. And it's not the fact that they're common activities, it's more so we don't know what your particular experience was like, right? So try to think about why your experience is uniquely yours, and think about the details to add to those activities when you're talking about them. Okay, so I have another 5 or so minutes. If you have more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&A. And while we're waiting for more questions to come in, I'll just quickly show you kind of the process of sending your interview to the schools that you're applying to. So once you finish an interview with Initial View, both the video part and the writing sample, the 20-minute writing sample, then Initial View asks you if you're happy with this recording, right? We send you the recording exactly the way it is, and we ask you if you're happy with it. And if you're happy with it, then you can go ahead and send this interview plus the writing sample to the schools that you're applying to. So you'll be able to see this page, and you can type in sort of the names of the schools that you want to see this particular interview. And we always recommend that you just send to all the schools you're applying to that accept Initial View. It never hurts to add another interview, because even though you might have interviewed with the school directly, it's always helpful to the admissions officers, to have another piece of information for reference, right? So for me, when I was reviewing applications, it was fun for me to have additional interviews to look at, because every single one offered additional information that was not mentioned or that was not included in one of the interviews. So even if you might have interviewed with, for example, NYU directly, I still recommend that you send your Initial View interview to them, because it'll help the admissions officers to know you better, right? It's really an important way for them to get to know you personally. So does Initial View have to go through school counselor? So it doesn't have to go through the school counselor. So it is between you and Initial View. And you'll be able to kind of figure this whole thing out with the Initial View team, whether it's booking, whether it's reviewing your recording, your video interview recording, or sending it to the school that you're applying to. You can do that without the school counselor being involved. And a lot of times students worry, if Initial View is going to see other parts of their application, or, who sees what information during this process. So Initial View only has access to your interview and nothing else in your application. So you don't have to worry about, us seeing your Common App or your essay or whatnot. It's just what you end up writing in the writing sample and your video recording. So here's the answer to that question. And there's another question. Okay, so usually when will Initial View start? So you can do it whenever. And for students who are currently juniors, we also offer junior interviews. So you can do kind of an early practice and get feedback from admissions officers at different colleges and universities who will watch your interview and give you suggestions, give you advice about how to how to make your interviews a little better, or how to present yourself a little better. And for seniors who are going to be applying to college this coming cycle, you can start booking now. There are lots of different time slots available, and you can just choose a time that's most convenient for you. And then you'll be paired with an interviewer who's available at the time as well. And then you will do an interview online via video. So you can just go on Initial View's website, go on their booking page, and then you'll be able to see the available time slots. And okay, another question about whether you can redo an interview, and if so, how many times? For applicants for 2022 fall entry, when do we send the interviews? So I think you're thinking, so students who are applying for college in the fall semester of 2022, right? So the seniors, current rising seniors. So you can redo an interview if you would like, as many times as you want. You can just always pay for another interview if you're not happy with the previous one. We recommend that you just send your first interview, because a lot of times students overthink, and they, and then at the end, the first interview ends up still being the best one that they did. But if you're really not happy with the first try, you can redo an interview as many times as you would like. And yes, for rising seniors for fall, there would be the class of 2026. But yes, seniors who will be applying this fall and winter. So the timeline of you sending the interviews depends on the deadlines of at the different schools they're applying to. So I also recommend that, you make a list, you make an Excel sheet, but you keep track of all the different deadlines that schools have. So for the most part, it depends on whether you want to apply early decision, early action, or regular decision, right? So the early deadlines are a little bit, on the earlier side. So they usually hover around like late October, early to mid November. So those deadlines will be the same deadline that you have for your interview. So make sure that you send, if you're applying for early decisions or early deadlines, make sure you have your initial video sent to them by that timeline as well. And if you're thinking regular decision, most of them fall around kind of the January 1st, January deadline. So it's the same deadline for your interviews as well. No worries. And if you have other questions, feel free to pop them in. Oh, and we're actually out of time. And so yes, we have this portion of Tuesday Talk every Tuesday. So after every Tuesday Talk, we'll stay for another 20 minutes or so just to answer any questions you have about interviews, about, admissions, looking at interviews. If you do have more questions, feel free to come back next Tuesday after our 1 hour session. And thank you so much for doing this, for joining us. And I hope you all stay safe. Have a great morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. And take care, everybody. Bye.